I spent the earlier part of this week reporting down in northern Mexico and the Rio Grande Valley about the border crisis, and I know some people hesitate to use that word. It's rare that I agree with Secretary of State Antony Blinken, but he actually said this week that the situation, the challenges that America is facing at the southern border are, quote, beyond anything that anyone has seen before. The New York Post reported on what a lot of people have reported on, the start of another caravan. Now, caravans themselves, this is about an 11,000 person caravan. That is not, that's sort of a drop in the bucket in terms of people that are attempting to cross the border and who are then getting some type of parole. There's still Title 42 in place, but the situation is nothing short of a humanitarian crisis. Whether you think it's an economic crisis or a national crisis, whatever it is, it's absolutely a humanitarian crisis. You can see in this footage that I took from a Catholic charity, a Catholic shelter. This was in Reynosa, which is it's just across the border from McAllen, Texas. So this is one of the places where the crisis is most pronounced, where there are the most crossing attempts. Just look at the conditions here. A lot of the people at this shelter and in Matamoros as well, the cities both of Reynosa and Matamoros, are actually Haitians. They haven't lived in Haiti for many, many years. I didn't talk to a single one of them as I was having these conversations with many migrants who had lived in Haiti recently, like within the last 5 years. Most left in the years after that 2010 earthquake, and are really living in sad and desperate conditions now after they left, in many cases, Chile or Brazil. And it's this gentleman on the screen was from Honduras, I believe. They've risked everything. A lot of them don't meet the legal definition or the legal standards for an asylum claim, but they have horrible stories. They say in some cases their family members have been kidnapped, they have been kidnapped by cartels, and that's the interesting thing sort of about the caravan too. It's that there's an economic infrastructure in Central America and in Mexico right now built around people who are traveling north to get to the border. And it's basically cartels. And cities like Reynosa and Matamoros are largely under control of cartels. So these are dangerous conditions for people who are desperate. They want to get into the United States. And because, this is the big challenge, because some people are getting in on humanitarian parole, the news travels down through Central America. Some of it is bad information. Some of it is bad information actually willfully presented by the cartels to get more and more people up there. They try to get more and more people to cross because it's business for them. You have to pay the cartels.
Numbers game, right?
It's a numbers game. You have to pay the cartels to cross. Otherwise, they will literally pull you out of the water. They will literally, they monitor the river so fastidiously that
there are other border patrol.
Yeah, they absolutely they are on the other side. And so they will literally pull you out of the water. This is a huge money-making machine now for cartels, but people are so desperate for better lives that just the hope of getting into the United States is enough to take enormous risks. And sadly, it's all benefiting cartels.
So how many people are at that Catholic charity? What was your guess of like how sprawling that campus was?
Yeah, so they actually told us, I forget what it was, I would have to check my notes for the exact number, but most of these places were way over capacity. So these are shelters, like in some cases, we went to a Bible school. It's run by a pastor who's worked in Matamoros since like 2000. And he had to like convert his building into a shelter for a lot of Haitian migrants, actually, because it's been such an influx. People have nowhere to stay. They're sleeping on the streets in some cases. There was a line, the shelter you just saw with the tents, you could not have fit another tent on that roof. There was a line just to get into the shelter. And the shelter then can, if you have money, you can hire a lawyer. And to get money, how do you get money? I mean, you could try to work, you can have your family wire you money over time, but it costs a lot of money to get a lawyer. And that's your only shot, but those facilities are able to help you with that. So there's a line just to get into the shelter,
right.
And you see it on the streets.
So Biden's in office right now. This is what you could call a Democratic approach to how to handle these migration flows. The Republican approach is build more walls and turn people away as quickly as possible. Neither of those, to me, seem remotely responsive in any useful way to the crisis. So if we're in a world where we are deglobalizing, where things are coming back on shore, and if you project the American population out over the next couple of decades, you start to see a rapidly aging population.
Yeah.
And we have a labor shortage already. There's no reason to think that labor shortage is going to get much better over the next decades as the population continues to age. So what would be the harm, just to talk in like an openly radical way, what would be the harm of telling those people, you know what, if you want to come in, you have to register. Here is a work permit. Here is a path to eventually getting citizenship. But you could say, let's say it's going to take you 10 or 20 years, whatever it is. Here are the conditions that you have to meet. You have to follow the law. You have to take the different citizenship tests. But you can come into the country. To say, like, you know what, this is happening anyway, and the process we have isn't actually stopping it. We can build as many walls as we want. It's not going to end this. So let's just figure this out and allow people the freedom of movement around the world that in some ways feels like a fundamental human right. What would happen if you did that?
Yeah, no, it's a good question, because the border wall is a total distraction. It's basically just like, it's not to say there aren't some important reasons to have it, especially in particular parts, but if you don't have a policy, an asylum policy and a legal policy that matches what you're doing with the wall, it's kind of all for naught, because most crossings come right through the border itself. And so it's all a total mess. You're right, neither approach is working, and especially when you have Kamala Harris and Joe Biden, I think these are mixed messages that are not helpful to anybody. They're mixed messages, and they go through, it's a line that runs through every administration in recent history, whether it's Republican or Democrat, not doing enough to communicate with people accurate information in Central America and in Mexico, exactly what will happen if you come up to the border, what the policies are and what the policies aren't, because people have a lot of bad information, and that's what convinces them to leave. And in some cases, they're pushed out. But the thing that concerns me about just sort of giving people work permits, and by the way, that's front of mind for people. I was talking to a family, and I'm forgetting exactly where they were from, actually. They were, I want to say they were Honduran, or may have been Guatemalan, but they were showing us their documents, and they had been let into the United States. So this was at a shelter on the other side of the border. They're showing us their documents, and they were like, is there a work permit here? Can we work? And that's what they wanted to do. The problem, though, is that I think it continues to cause more unrest in Central and South America. The more people you have fleeing, you have no incentives to repair those countries. And that is an even sadder state of affairs. That's already a huge problem for the political violence. I talked to somebody who says it's very hard to verify these stories, but I talked to a very upset woman who asked us to pray with her, actually. It was quite a moving conversation about how her daughter had been kidnapped by a gang in her home country, and they said, you have 24 hours, it was extortion, to pay us X. Left the country. And when people don't have that path out to risk everything, to pay the cartels, to make the journey.
Did they get the daughter?
No, they left. This is a story, which is, I talked to another family who had been kidnapped actually in Reynosa within the last couple of weeks. So the incentives to repair, and it's not to say we didn't do anything to foment that unrest in the first place, they have to be there too, because that's humane.
Did anything that you saw change any of your views on the crisis?
Yeah,
and immigration policy generally?
Yeah, I mean, there were two things that really stood out to me, a combination of two things. One, it's that it's just for a chance, right? So like people are so desperate not just to get into the United States, but they're risking everything just for a chance to get into the United States, just to be as close to the border as possible. Some people leave the shelters or don't even go into the shelters so that they can stay right at the border. We talked to a group of Haitians that was literally at the entrance to the border itself, because if something changes, that's why the Biden administration needs to be way clearer about this. they're right there, and they'll be the first ones in. And a lot of them are suffering, they don't have the proper medication. They're in potentially violent situations. The cartel is controlling these areas. So I think it's quite interesting that, these people don't necessarily think the doors are going to fling open and be let in, but they're doing it just for the chance to live in the United States.
Right. Well, thanks for the reporting.
Yeah, well, and shout out to my colleague John Daniel Davidson and a great journalist out of Mexico City, David Agran, who I was there with. Definitely a tragedy unfolding just south of our border, and there's much more we could do.
Well, thank you. Yeah, thank you for that, and we will have more rising right after this.